Hi guys. So the fourth debate, Democratic debate, just happened, and Andrew Yang did pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and do a review, a debate review on everything Andrew Yang said at the fourth Democratic debate. Now we'll go through what he said, and we'll see exactly how well he actually did relative to the response from the Yang gang. So let's go ahead and start that off with his first response, his opening response here.
Mr. Yang, do you think there's already enough evidence out there to impeach the president? Please respond.
I support impeachment, but we shouldn't have any illusions that impeaching Donald Trump will, one, be successful, or two, erase the problems that got him elected in 2016. We're standing in the great state of Ohio, the ultimate purple state, the ultimate bellwether state. Why did Donald Trump win your state by 8 points? Because we got rid of 300,000 manufacturing jobs in your towns, and we're not stopping there. How many of you have noticed stores closing where you work and live here in Ohio? Raise your hands. It's not just you. Amazon alone is closing 30% of America's stores and malls, soaking up $20 billion in business while paying zero in taxes. These are the problems that got Donald Trump elected, the fourth industrial revolution. And that is going to accelerate and grow more serious regardless of who is in the Oval Office. The fact is, Donald Trump, when we're talking about him, we are losing. We need to present a new vision, and that even includes talking about impeaching Donald Trump.
So let's take what he said. I think he made the right move to stand out from the rest of the Democratic crowd, bashing Trump, talking about impeachment. And the fact is, he's right. He's talking about how impeaching Donald Trump would probably not result in his removal and would most likely energize his base. Now, he did a great job here pivoting to his core message, which is automation and really just income inequality and job loss. So the question is, did this really land and did this really stick? Now, unfortunately, this may be the unpopular opinion, but just because you're right doesn't mean you did the right thing. Now, I think we all agree with what he said, but unfortunately, I was in a crowd in a debate watch party, and most people did not respond either positively or really anything to what he just said. Most people just kind of shrugged and kind of moved on. He didn't really make a big splash here, and that might not be any fault of his own, but a lot of people who are watching these debates are vindictive. They're looking for Trump bashing. Now, so this is kind of a snapshot at least in terms of who was watching the debate. Now, we might have people who think that this was refreshing take and this is actually talking about the real problems, but at least in that room, it did not seem to garner that praise that we would have liked, I think, and at least a lot of maybe more progressive-leaning candidates would have liked. So let's go on and see what he says next.
Mr. Yang, your main solution to job loss from automation is a universal basic income. Why is giving people $1,000 a month better than Sanders' plan to guaranteeing them a job?
I am for the spirit of a federal jobs guarantee, but you have to look at how.
Okay, before we go on, I really disagree with how he started here. And this really makes him get caged into this idea of being a one-issue candidate. The debate moderator framed the entire premise incorrectly, and he should have corrected her on that. She said that his main solution to automation is universal basic income, which isn't the case at all. What he should be saying is universal basic income or the freedom dividend isn't a solution, isn't the solution. It is simply the foundation of which we need to build, right? So, and that is something that a lot of people criticize him over, and he should have addressed that at the bud, nipped it at the bud. He should have said, it is only the foundation of which everything else is going to be built upon. Or he could have said that $1,000 a month is not going to solve automation, but help us transition into the next stage of our economy. It is a transition method. So the framing itself is already incorrect there, I think. And I think it would have been a great chance for him to set the record straight there.
How it would actually materialize in practice. What are the jobs? Who manages you? What if you don't like your job? What if you're not good at your job? The fact is, most Americans do not want to work for the federal government. And saying that that is the vision of the economy of the 21st century, to me, is not a vision that most Americans would embrace.
All right, let's stop there for a second. So, on one hand, I think Andrew kind of hits the nail on the head. It's true. Most Americans probably don't want to work for the federal government. But I think he would have won a lot more progressives and also liberals with siding with Sanders and Warren to a degree by saying that, look, there is a mutual interest in overlapping the private and public sector. There is totally room for public jobs, and he's totally for the spirit of investing in, green energy jobs, for example, or infrastructure jobs. But those have to be limited in scope and function. He might have been able to explain that while he's for those things, he's not for a perpetual guarantee of jobs and essentially enslaving a population to be working for the federal government. Maybe not in those words, because that's kind of combative, but he should have at least acknowledged the fact that he's not against using the government to fund specific jobs. And I think it's a mistake there to draw that stark of a contrast without qualifying it a little bit. So let's go on.
Also, Senator Sanders' description of a federal jobs guarantee does not take into account the work of people like my wife, who's at home with our 2 boys, one of whom is autistic. We have a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month. It actually recognizes the work that is happening in our families and our communities. It helps all Americans transition. Because the fact is, and you know this in Ohio, if you rely upon the federal government to target its resources, you wind up with failed retraining programs and jobs that no one wants. When we put the money into our hands, we can build a trickle-up economy. From our people, our families, and our communities up, it will enable us to do the kind of work that we want to do. This is the sort of positive vision in response to the 4th Industrial Revolution that we have to embrace as a party.
Senator.
Okay, I think that was overall a pretty decent answer. I think he could have expanded a little bit more on the fact that this rewards uncompensated work, that is, or at least traditionally uncompensated work. Now, think about this. He painted a very abstract picture of what a trickle-up economy is, and people don't quite understand that. But if you start framing it in a way that most liberals or Democratic viewers would understand, is exactly what he did originally, was that his wife is at home, a stay-at-home parent, and what is her work valued at? And naturally, Andrew would say 0. And this would make him such a pro-woman candidate by going down that path, saying like, and who does the most of the uncompensated work in society, and that's women. Women are consistently, abused, financially, professionally, and personally, and this would at least begin to divorce some of their survival from their, divorce some of their stability from their occupation in order for them to better their circumstances. If you frame it in such a way where this benefit just extends, more broadly in terms of rewarding uncompensated work in general by providing more specific examples, I think that would have landed a little bit better.
Senator Warren, you wrote that blaming job loss on automation is, quote, a good story, except it's not really true. So should workers here in Ohio not be worried about losing their jobs to automation?
So the data show that we've had a lot of problems with losing jobs, but the principal reason has been bad trade policy.
For child care, instead of having to pay 20% of their income for it.
Senator Warren.
I'm really glad that Andrew decided to jump in here and interrupt, because I think this might be the first time he's ever done so. So let's see what he says.
Warren, I've been
Go ahead,
talking
Mr.
to
Yang.
Americans around the country about automation, and they're smart. They see what's happening around them. Their Main Street stores are closing. They see a self-serve kiosk in every McDonald's, every grocery store, every CVS. Driving a truck is the most common job in 29 states, including this one. 3.5 million truck drivers in this country, and my friends in California are piloting self-driving trucks. What is that going to mean for the 3.5 million truckers or the 7 million Americans who work in truck stops, motels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal? Saying this is a rules problem is ignoring the reality that Americans see around us every single day.
That was a brilliant answer. He directly challenged the premise that Warren laid out, was that automation is pretty much a quote-unquote good story, but ultimately untrue story of the suffering of manufacturing in America. Now, I think he brought forth the data. He needed to draw just a tiny bit more of a widespread picture of what that looks like in general, and how that will cascade down rapidly. He could have gone to his talking point about labor participation, how many people didn't transition from this job loss, and paint a more vivid picture that way.
Senator Warren, respond, please.
So I understand that what we're all looking for is how we strengthen America's middle class. And actually, I think the thing closest to the universal basic income is Social Security. It's one of the reasons that I put forward a plan to extend the solvency of Social Security by decades. It also has a provision for your wife, for those who stay home to do caregiving for children or for seniors, and creates an opportunity for them to get credit on their Social Security. So after a lifetime of hard work, people are entitled to retire with dignity.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
I see this as an important question about I want to understand the data on this.
Senator,
and
thank you very
I want to make sure
much.
we're responding to make this work.
Your time is up.
I
I want to give Congresswoman Gabbard.
This was the biggest miss/disappointment of the night. Warren literally offered herself up on a silver platter, and Yang could have eviscerated her right here. She talked about how she was going to essentially bump up Social Security recipients by $200. As the math candidate, he could have just simply said, "Last time I checked, Senator, $1,000 goes a long way further than $200, or he could have said any variation thereof, like $1,000 is more than $200 last time I checked, or last time I did the math. He could have. It was such a easy layup, like could have been a slam dunk, could have been a moment of the night kind of thing, and he missed it. He also missed the fact that he could have tacked her on the premise of rewarding women literally half a lifetime after they're actually mothers. She's talking about rewarding mothers, quote unquote, after they retire, while Andrew is actually actively helping mothers right now. This was such a missed opportunity, and I'm glad that he interjected initially, but he really can't miss opportunities like this. This could have been a huge talking point of the night. It could have been talked about in the media. It's got to be earned, guys. It's got to be, he's got to seize these opportunities, and he can't be Mr. Nice Guy all the way through. And the fact is, this missed a lot on the ground. When I heard what he said and everyone else heard what he said, the response generally was was lukewarm. People kind of just nodded, like, yeah, that's kind of true, but it wasn't a big slam dunk for Andrew as much as we want it to be. It's a shame, but he's got to capitalize on these things for sure.
A chance to respond.
Thank you. Really what this is about is getting to the heart of the fear. that is well-founded. As people look to this automation revolution, they look to uncertainty. They don't know how this is going to affect their jobs and their everyday lives. And I agree with my friend Andrew Yang. I think universal basic income is a good idea to help provide that security so that people can have the freedom to make the kinds of choices that they want to see.
Mr. Yang, your response. Would you oppose a wealth tax?
Senator Warren is 100% right that we're in the midst of the most extreme winner-take-all economy in history. And a wealth tax makes a lot of sense in principle. The problem is that it's been tried in Germany, France, Denmark, Sweden, and all those countries ended up repealing it because it had massive implementation problems and did not generate the revenue that they'd projected. If we can't learn from the failed experiences of other countries, what can we learn from? We should not be looking to other countries' mistakes. Instead, we should look at what Germany, France, Denmark, and Sweden still have, which is a value-added tax. If we give the American people a tiny slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every robot truck mile, every Facebook ad, we can generate hundreds of billions of dollars and then put it into our hands because we know best how to use it.
Concise, brilliant. He addressed the point. It very much was a great moment for him, I think. And I think we all know that the wealth tax has an implementation problem, and yeah, and I think he went through. I mean, in the interest of time, he might have been able to go through some of those problems, such as capital flight, the hiding of assets, the divorce, split assets, and so on and so forth. But I think overall, he really, showed some life here. That was good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Yang, your response to Putin and Russia.
Of course. We have to look at the chain of events. How did we get here? The fact is we're falling apart at home, so we voted in Donald Trump, and he's now led us down this dangerous path with erratic and unreliable foreign policy. We have to let Russia know, look, we get it. We've tampered with other elections. You've tampered with our elections, and now it has to stop. And if it does not stop, we will take this as an act of hostility against the American people. I believe most Americans would support me on this. But Russian hacking of our democracy is an illustration of the 21st century threats. Artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, climate change, loose nuclear material, military drones, and non-state actors. These are the threats that are going to require our administration to catch up in terms of technology. We all know we are decades behind the curve on technology. We saw when Mark Zuckerberg testified at Congress the nature of the questioning. As Commander-in-Chief, I will help pull us forward.
Thank you.
Mark,
and that's going to be a huge responsibility of the next president.
Thank you, Mr.
Honestly, it was a great answer, and you can tell he's not a politician because he was a little bit too truthful. He talked about America's meddling in other elections, and if anyone knows any history at all, we have definitely tampered and fought wars over other regimes, and we are no angel. But unfortunately, most people don't want to hear this equivalence with Russia. And I think Amy Klobuchar is about to chime in here, touting, America, the great, and all this nonsense. But I think this was a slight miscalculation on Andrew's part of being too honest. Let's see.
Respond to Mr. Yang. I don't see a moral equivalency between our country and Russia. Vladimir Putin is someone who has shot down planes over Ukraine, who has poisoned his opponent, and we have not talked about what we need to do to protect ourselves from Russia invading our election.
Mr. Yang, you want to decriminalize the possession and use of small amounts of opioids, including heroin. How would that solve the crisis?
That's exactly right. And we have to recognize this is a disease of capitalism run amok. There was a point when there were more opiate prescriptions in the state of Ohio than human beings in the state of Ohio.
Great line. Just a great opening. He's targeting the question directly, and let's see where he goes with this.
And for some reason, the federal government thought that was appropriate. They ended up levying a $600 million fine against Purdue Pharma, which sounds like a lot of money, until you realize that company made $30 billion. They got a 2% fine, and they killed tens of thousands of Americans an hour. So if the government turned a blind eye to this company spreading a plague among its people, then the least we can do is put the resources to work in our community so our people have a fighting chance to get well. Even though this is not a money problem, we all know this is a human problem. And part of helping people get the treatment that they need is to let them know that they're not going to be referred to a prison cell. They will be referred to treatment and counseling. I talked to an EMT in New Hampshire, and he said he saves the same addicts over and over again. Because the fact is, after you save someone who's ODing, you just bring them back to their house and they OD again the following week. So we need to decriminalize opiates for personal use. We have to let the country know this is not a personal failing. This was a systemic government failing. And then we need to open up safe consumption and safe injection sites around the country because they save lives.
Thank you, Mr.
Great answer. The only thing I would just add to that would be he could totally take this out of the abstract and illustrate where this does work, or where it did work, which was Portugal. And he's mentioned this before. He could have said something to the effect that, look, this isn't some abstract theory. This has worked. Studies have shown that in countries such as Portugal that have adopted this mentality have shown lower drug overdoses, lower drug consumption, and so on and so forth. Rattle off, your data, but taking it from the abstract to the real, let's say it hits home. Let's say it hit home a little harder.
Mr. Yang, let's turn to the growing concerns over the power of big tech companies. Mr. Yang, Senator Warren is calling for companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google to be broken up. Is she right? Does that need to happen?
As usual, Senator Warren is 100% right in diagnosing the problem. There are absolutely excesses in technology, and in some cases, having them divest parts of their business is the right move. But we also have to be realistic that competition doesn't solve all of the problems.
This is actually a very interesting thing, and I don't know if there are any anti-Yang people, claiming that he's a libertarian Trojan horse, because from the horse's mouth, he boldly claimed that competition really doesn't solve all the problems. That's a very unlibertarian thing to say. He acknowledges the fact that there are market failures and that we need to do something about that. Now, to his point, I feel like he could have illustrated and got more brownie points, I suppose, with the crowd, was that he did agree with Warren saying that there are excesses and we totally should, it would make sense to divest in some of those companies, but he could have made that slightly more prominent to make sure people understand that he understands where they're coming from. A lot of this is just a framing issue, because he's going to go into why divesting doesn't necessarily solve a lot of the problems. But let's see what he says.
It's not like any of us wants to use the fourth best navigation app. That would be like cruel punishment. There's a reason why no one is using Bing today. Sorry, Microsoft, it's true.
Yeah, that was a great line. Got a little reaction out of everyone.
So it's not like breaking up these big tech companies will revive Main Street businesses around the country. And as the parent of 2 young children, I'm particularly concerned about screen use and its effect on our children. Studies clearly show that we're seeing record levels of anxiety and depression coincident with smartphone adoption and social media use. Breaking up the tech companies does nothing to make our kids healthier. What we have to do is we have to home in on the specific problems we're trying to solve and use 21st century solutions for 21st century problems. Using a 20th century antitrust framework will not work. We need new solutions and a new toolkit. That's the way we can.
That overall is pretty good. I'm not sure how over the head most of that went, over the majority of the audience, but I mean, it answered the question well, and I think he separated himself a little bit from Warren, which was good. I think he could have talked a little bit more about mental health in that regard. He has always talked about how screen use, social media has, negative impacts on the mental health of our population, particularly underage girls in particular. Making him open up his rhetoric to a diverse audience, and I think most Yang Gangers know that female representation is something that is slightly lacking.
Fight back. The best way we can fight back against big tech companies is to say our data is our property. Right now, our data is worth more than oil. How many of you remember getting your data check in the mail? It got lost. It went to Facebook, Amazon, Google. If we say this is our property and we share in the gains, that's the best way we can balance the scales against the big tech companies.
good point. I thought it went over the head. This would have gone over the head of most people, unfortunately. He kind of combined two things really quickly. Any of you guys know about, the oil check and the tech check and all that stuff. He made a big leap in assumption of assuming that the audience knew what he was talking about, how companies profit off of our data, and that we deserve some of that money. Now, he could have pointed out that in Alaska, they share in the oil revenue, that we should share in the tech revenue. Make the connection more clear, because I guarantee you, if you were not already gang, people would have missed that easily.
Last week, Ellen DeGeneres was criticized after she and former President George W. Bush were seen laughing together at a football game. Ellen defended their friendship, saying, "We're all different, and I think that we've forgotten that that's okay, that we're all different." So in that spirit, we'd like you to tell us about a friendship that you've had that would surprise us, what impacts it's had on you and your beliefs. Mr. Yang?
First, I want to thank all the voters tuned in at home. If you don't feel like you answered you got your question answered tonight, it's understandable. There are 12 of us. I'm going to be answering voter questions.
He has a tendency to speak too quickly. I have to say, from a rhetorical standpoint, he really needs to work. His speech and debate coach needs to work with him on his delivery. He sometimes stops on inflection, stops at inopportune times, or starts too quickly on others. It sometimes does not allow his point to drive home with the audience, and I think that's something that he could definitely work on.
Questions for 10 straight hours this Friday. My website, yang2020.com, and if you ask your question tonight, there's a better chance I'll get to it. My surprising friendship. It's been so much fun running for president because I've gotten to meet so many Americans I never would have gotten to meet otherwise.
See, otherwise, like the way he finishes his sentence, it's actually, it needs to be coached out of him, ironically. And I don't want him to be a politician, but he needs to learn how to settle his points and drive them home, not end on a up tilt in his inflections.
The friendship that sticks out for me is a guy named Fred, who's an avid Trump supporter, a trucker. He let me ride in his truck for hours. He spent some time in jail. I heard about his experiences trying to get other people off of drugs. And I'm happy to say that after our ride together, he actually said that he would move from Donald Trump to my campaign, which was a thrill for me, and we've remained in touch ever since. The truth is that what happened to the 4 million...
I think this would have been a great opportunity for him to really highlight what that means. He's saying that, look, he is one of 2 candidates that actively draw from Trump's support base. Who can build the broadest coalition to beat Trump in the general? This is a great point that he's going to make. I think he could have highlighted that a little bit better. Otherwise, it kind of just seems like he's just grabbing, like, oh, look, Trump supporters support me. But really driving home the fact that he has a really broad coalition.
Million manufacturing workers here in Ohio and Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Iowa.
This is kind of, again, nothing wrong with what he actually said, but it's just more like how he said it. He could have definitely had more inflection and more less monotone delivery, and Wisconsin, like really, Pennsylvania and, Ohio, like really enunciate those words and try to drive home like the severity of the issues. He's going too quickly, and I think a lot of people are just glossing over, and this is anecdotally, of course, but generally speaking, the crowd did not exactly respond negatively or positively. They were just simply neutral on it.
Did not care about our political party. The fourth industrial revolution is now migrating from manufacturing workers to retail, call centers, transportation, as well as to white-collar workers like attorneys, pharmacists, and radiologists.
Again, same thing. It's just a very monotone delivery. He's just listing off all the professions that are going to be impacted by automation. In fact, he should have been driving home the point of the human impact that this would have, and really saying like, and even, really highlight the severity of it by saying even high-tech jobs like radiologists or, lawyers or, artists, and any number of ways he needs to work on his impact on his delivery to really highlight the severity and cascading effect of automation and what that impact would be like on the general economy. And the capital flight, the intellectual flight from from inland to coastal regions, he really needs to work on the delivery aspect of his talking points, because most Yang Gang probably took 2 hours to really listen to him go off and explain a lot of his policies and why they make sense. The vast majority of voters do not care about policies. They care about delivery. They care about the pathos, if you will, like the emotion that they can generate from what you're saying. Excuse me. And I think let's see him finish up here.
It does not care about our party. Donald Trump had a set of solutions in 2016. What did he say? He said, we're going to build a wall. We're going to turn the clock back. We're going to bring the old jobs back. America, we have to do the opposite of all of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society as quickly as possible. We have to evolve in the way we think about ourselves and our work and our value. It is not left, it is not right, it is forward, and that is where we must take the country in 2020.
Mr. Yang, thank you very much.
Okay, well, that was it. I really, we can see here Saagar thought Andrew Yang won the fourth debate. I think he's really highlighting the fact that he moved the Overton window and really managed to get his message out there into the mainstream. But if we're really serious about winning this thing, that means we have to grab a whole swath of people. And the fact is, I've been out canvassing, I've been out talking to people, I've been introducing to things most people, introducing Yang to as many people as I can. And the fact of the matter is, most people simply do not know who he is. Even if they do know or care about politics, their understanding of policy is so vastly limited that it's almost like he needs to clean up his language and deliver. He can't miss opportunities like the Warren opportunity, where he can grab a soundbite and grab headlines. Get those poll numbers up, get those donations up. He has one more quarter to make this work, and he's got another debate to make an impact. This is the stage where he can really draw a distinction from him and the other front runners, and why he deserves to be up there. And while most Yang Gang probably believes that he killed the debate and he dominated it, but I think we should take a step back and really evaluate this honestly. And to me, if I were not a Yang Gang member, what would I think? And I would think that he had an okay performance, to be perfectly honest. He didn't destroy anyone. He didn't get attacked, at least. And he had some moments, and so did a lot of other candidates. If we look at past a policy standpoint, but more of a impactful standpoint, he simply didn't deliver as much as he should have or as much as he needed. Out of 10, I would probably rate his performance perhaps 6 or 7 out of 10 if I'm being generous. There's a lot of work. It's a positive, and that's me being positive. Like, I think it was a good performance. It's better than neutral, which I would rate a 5. But it was mildly positive, and the fact that he's even there is a positive. But he needs to now really move the discussion into his realm, and which he's starting to do. They're talking about automation, and I think you can thank people like Padgett and other Yang Gang members who have tweeted out questions to make sure these questions appear in the debates, because that's what we need to do on the ground. But we also need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to have him really analyze his own debates, because I don't want him to be Cory Booker with his exaggerated speech patterns and, glorified grandstanding. Like, that's not the point. The point is to make sure the American people understand how impactful his message should be. And that, unfortunately, requires being a politician. We are donating our time and our money to him to be a politician, essentially. We want him to be the president, and that means doing whatever it takes to do that. And it's time to recognize this honestly. And we'll see in the December or November debates and see if there's anything that changes there. But I'd say, overall, we should remain positive, and that this is a good thing, and hopefully a good sign of things to come for Andrew. This is Andrew. Hopefully we'll see Andrew unleashed in the next debate, and we see exactly what happens when he starts challenging people one-on-one. We saw a small taste of that with the Warren scuffle, but I really wanted to see that big blow, and calling her out on her faulty data or her lack of vision in terms of her meager $200 Social Security addition. There was no reason why he couldn't have capitalized on that more, and that probably could have just made the debate for him. All right, guys, I'll be back with another debate review next time. Maybe we'll do one before then. In the meantime, I'm considering putting out videos and tutorials on how to persuade people politically and persuasively, and how to canvass in real life, because what we need to do is really move the ground support of Yang's campaign, because right now, go look at the war chests, and we are fighting from behind, and we need to start fighting like we are fighting from behind, because we can't stay on Reddit, stay on YouTube, stay on Twitter and expect to win this. We need to get on the ground, go to your colleges, go to your malls, go to your retail stores, start spreading the message, because these are the people that are most likely to change. If you have access to older parents, talk to them. If you're not talking to your parents, you're not talking to your friends, you're not talking to real life strangers, you're probably wasting your time. So get out there and let's make this thing happen.